Okay, I'm going to throw in my intro. I'm Sharon Venturine from Toronto. I am CEO of a company called Parent Tested, Parent Approved. We have a community of 200,000 moms and thousands of businesses we work with. And looking forward to hearing tips on how we can market with a little bit of class during this difficult time.
Lovely. Thank you for having.
I'm Bruce Harrett in Toronto. I'm a business coach, and I'm looking forward to hearing the speakers today and learning something. Thank you. Peace.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anik. I'm Swish's co-founder with Trufan, and I'm super excited to hear everyone speak. I put it out in my LinkedIn post, but I'm fortunate enough to get to talk to these people on a regular basis, but I love when they get to speak because they're some of the best storytellers that I know. So I'm super excited.
Perfect. So thank you for the introductions, guys, so far. If you didn't introduce yourself, feel free to do it over chat. At this time, it would be awesome if everyone could quickly go and mute themselves in case a toddler appears or something happens in the back. We don't want to have any interruptions to the speakers. A couple of just housekeeping things before we get started with Allen. For everyone joining us so far, we really do appreciate your time. And I genuinely do know that for a lot of you that came out to the event, things might be hard right now. So the fact that you're spending an hour, 2 hours with us and you're being part of this discussion is amazing. So hope that everyone enjoys this session. We'll definitely be getting feedback after the event as well. During the event, if you ever have any questions for the speakers, feel free to put it into the chat. My job this whole event is going to be writing down every single session's notes and writing down some of the questions that came from it and directing a very small Q&A period with some of the speakers after. So if you do have any questions, feel free to drop it into the chat and I'll pick a few from there and ask it to the speaker after. During the Q&A session as well, I'll make sure that you can ask the question that you wanted to ask to the speaker directly so that you can have that direct conversation with them. I do want to get through the agenda though. So speakers, again, if you do go over the 12, 13-minute mark, I'm going to give you a warning. And if you go over the 15-minute mark, I will disconnect you from the Zoom. So please try to keep it to 15 minutes maximum. That's really everything I think from my angle. The last thing to note, the donation link online will stay up until 11:30 p.m. So after the event, if you would like to donate, we're putting all the money from this event obviously to the World Health Organization's COVID Response Fund, going towards ventilators and masks, especially in developing countries. So if you'd like to put in some money after, you can do so as well. That's everything from me. And yes, the basketball net in the background, I really should have cut that off, but that's Swish, right? So that's me in a nutshell. I'm going to get started by introducing our first speaker, Allen Gannett. He is an incredible marketeer, ran a company called Track Maven since the age of 21. Recently, he merged that company with Skyward and he became an author for The Creative Curve, which you might have heard of. He's also a LinkedIn expert, in my opinion. He's someone I look up to on the platform. So without further ado, Allen, you have the floor.
Thanks, Swish. Hi, everyone. Thanks for spending time with me today. Swish has told us about how he's going to cut us off if we go over, so I will be on time and pithy. But I'm going to be sharing my screen. And, if any of you want to get in touch afterwards, feel free to shoot me a note. Always happy to chat and answer any other questions. But, today what I really wanted to talk about is a topic that might at first blush seem a little off of the small business path, but I actually think is really important when it comes to running a small business, and that is creativity. We're facing a time where everyone's facing a lot of constraints, a lot of problems, a lot of change, and I think creativity is a really key skill for dealing with that. So I wrote a book called The Creative Curve. It's a book all about how to develop creativity. And what I want to talk about specifically today are 3 things that you can do as a small business owner to actually use this period to be creative, to move the puck forward. That's my Canadian reference for the day, and actually make positive change. So I wanted to start by talking about, what the heck is creativity? Because a lot of us actually get creativity confused with another concept, which is productivity. And they're actually very different, right? Productivity is just doing something. Creativity is doing something valuable. So the academic definition of creativity is the ability to create things that are both novel and, underline and, valuable. And that's really, really important, because think about this. Like, if I went into Microsoft Paint and I created this is certainly novel, it's definitely not valuable, and certainly not creative. Now, on the other hand, if something's just valuable, also doesn't mean it's creative. So like, if I, for example, last year learned how to do conditional color formatting in Excel, like, oh my God, you look so smart, it's so easy, it's definitely valuable, it's certainly not novel, and it's definitely not creative. So creativity really comes from that intersection of novelty and value. And so I wanted to cover 3 quick things that I think everyone on this call can do to actually get into their creativity during this time. And the first one is consumption. And I want to explain why this is important. So when I came to consumption, I don't mean it's all the comfort food that we're all eating, although like pizza and fries are really delicious. No, what I'm talking about is information consumption. And information consumption is one of these things where we often get caught up where we think about creatives as these very active doers. They're constantly doing. And on the other side, we think about consumers as very passive. You know, they're consuming, they're not really doing much. But what's interesting is I interviewed about 25 living creative achievers. So these are Oscar winners, Tony Award winners, Michelin star chefs, billionaires. And one of the patterns I found is that consumption is a huge part of their creative process. And I want to explain quickly why that is. So it goes all about to how our brain works and how creativity works. So it's a little cliche to talk about like left brain, right brain when you talk about creativity. It's actually like really important. So our left brain is where we store the dominant meanings of words or concepts. So if I asked you, you know, what color is the sky? Your left brain would be like, it's blue. It's where you solve math problems. So think about very logical step-by-step processing. And this processing is all very conscious, right? We're aware when we're solving a math problem of each step, like we're doing the sort of work. But creativity happens in the right hemisphere of our brain. And the right hemisphere is where we sort of think about more like distant or metaphorical associations of words or concepts. So like if I told you to imagine a worm, while your left brain would think about this guy, maybe without the weird face, your right hemisphere would think about things that are sort of related concepts. So maybe gummy worms, maybe bookworms, you know, maybe those songs you can't stop thinking about, those earworms. But the thing that's really important is that when your right hemisphere connects ideas together and connects distant concepts together, that work is what we talk about when we talk about creativity happening. That's when that combination of new ideas happens. And so our right hemisphere is where that work is done. What's interesting is that that work is all done below the level of our consciousness. So we don't sort of hear ourselves thinking through creative processes. We typically experience these little aha moments, these little flashes of genius. And you might experience this on a long walk, on your commute, in a shower, right? But the reason why that happens is these are all moments when our left hemisphere is sort of quiet. We're not doing a bunch of logical processing. You actually hear sort of what's going on in your right hemisphere. Now, the thing that's really important, though, is if you want your right hemisphere to do the work, if you want your right hemisphere to actually come up with interesting ideas, well, it has to have the raw ingredients. It has to have the dots to connect if you want to connect the dots. So I interviewed this doctor, Dr. Edward Bowden, who's sort of the big researcher in the field of sort of aha moments, flashes of genius. And he gave me this quote, which I think is a really valuable quote. And he said, look, you can't have insights about things you don't know anything about, right? You can't have insights about things you don't know anything about. When we look at these creative greats, like look at Paul McCartney, for example. Paul McCartney spent his entire childhood playing in bands, reading music. He had parents who were musicians, like incredibly musical surroundings. So yeah, he has these aha moments about music, like of course. And so the thing that's really important is that if you want to come up with new ideas, you have to feed your mind, you have to give yourself those raw ingredients. And so consumption is really important. So one of the patterns I found when I was working on my book is that the creative geniuses we think of, they're all massive consumers. They all go very, very deep in their topic. And so this consumption is really focused around primary sources. So it's not about, you know, reading Twitter and learning a little bit about a lot of things. No, this is about learning a lot about one thing and going very, very deep. And so think about primary sources. This is academic research. This is field interviews, because ultimately you want your right hemisphere to actually do the work. You want your right hemisphere to actually be able to connect those new and novel ideas together. So the second thing that I think is really critical during a time like this is to actually leverage constraints. So constraints have sort of a negative connotation. I think right now they very clearly are negative, right? We're going through a global health pandemic crisis, and there's a lot of constraints being forced upon us. But constraints also have a really powerful role in the creative process. Constraints also allow us to come up with new ideas. And the reason why is that when it comes to creativity, a big part of our job is to figure out where to apply our creative energy. So if you just had a sort of completely blank canvas and you were told to be creative, it's actually very hard, right? Where do you start? But what you find is that when it comes to creativity, constraints play a big role. Think about, for example, with songs. If you're writing a pop song, well, it should be between 2 to 3 minutes, should have 3 to 4 choruses, should have 3 to 4 verses, should have a bridge, and then you operate within that framework to create something new and novel. Another way to think about this is think about memes. So this is kind of silly. So this is a meme. This is Grumpy Cat, very famous meme. Grumpy Cat is actually named Tartar Sauce is his real name. He unfortunately died last year. But Grumpy Cat, the meme, it's pretty straightforward. The idea is there's a cat, he's grumpy, and there's text on the top that says something neutral, text on the bottom that says something negative. And so if you want to create your own Grumpy Cat meme, well, we all have the constraints. So we have a very specific sort of lens in which we have to apply our creativity. So, you know, if I wanted to create one about marketers, I could say, I love typos, they make marketers cry. Like, that wasn't that hard. And so constraints play a really powerful role by allowing us to actually focus our creativity. So if today the constraints are, how do you deliver your service remotely? How do you deliver your service virtually, right? That focuses your energy, that focuses it, and you can think about those not as restrictions, but ways to think about the future. Third and finally is you want to develop a creative community. So what do I mean by this? So I interviewed about 25 of these creative achievers. This is everyone from Casey Neistat, Pasek and Paul, who wrote Dear Evan Hansen, The Greatest Showman, Nina Jacobson, the producer behind Crazy Rich Asians, The Hunger Games, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things I think is so interesting is that we have this mythology of creatives as these solo people, right? They go and they do their stuff completely isolated from everyone else. But the reality is creativity is a team sport. Even look at folks like Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs, we think about as this lone solo genius, but actually on day one, he had Steve Wozniak because he needed technical help. Apple actually raised money really early on. They had multiple employees early on. This idea that Steve Jobs sort of like rolled Apple up a hill all by himself is just kind of comical. So in reality, these great creatives all have strong creative communities. And I think there's 4 key types of people you want to fill your creative community with. So the first is what I call a master teacher. And this is someone who has world-class talent, who teaches you their skills, who actually shares with you their expertise. This is really important. You see it over and over again. The people who achieve the most tend to be taught by people who've achieved the most. Second is you want to have what I call a conflicting collaborator. So typically when we think about a co-founder or collaborators, we look for people who we gel with, who are very similar to us, but actually you find the best creatives find people who fill their weaknesses. And that takes a lot of self-awareness and a lot of maturity, but it's about looking internally, what are the things I'm not good at, and finding other people to help me on those. Third, a modern muse. So this is someone who inspires you. So oftentimes this might be someone else in your field who you can sort of look to for best practices, friendly competition, just sort of energy. You see this with stand-up comedians a lot. They have a lot of friends with other comedians. It gives them that energy. It gives them that little bit of competitiveness that's really, really powerful. And fourth and finally is what I call prominent promoter. And so if you think about creativity, it's really important, even if you have a great idea, to get your idea heard. And the way that people do this in any creative field, whether it's a startup or art, is to have other people who have a higher reputation to sort of lend their reputation to you. So think about musicians, right? Musicians have opening acts. And then once those opening acts become famous, they have their own opening acts. Think about startups. You have a board of advisors or a board of directors. But this idea of lending reputation is really important. So think about who are people in your field who you could add as advisors, especially in a time like this when people are at home and they have a lot of time. So I want to end with a question for all of you, which is that when it comes to creativity, I think a lot of us are actually our own worst enemies. We give ourselves a lot of negative self-talk. We tell ourselves things like we're not good enough, we don't have the skills, we don't have the abilities. And so the thing I want to challenge you on is ultimately, is that what you're telling yourself? Thank you guys very much. I'm going to stick around and answer questions. And in the meantime, if you want to keep in touch, feel free to send me an email. Thanks, guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Alan. Whoever's speaking right now, can you mute yourself, please? I think. Lovely. That was a great talk, Alan. Thank you so much. We do have a quick question. So from Sean Smith, he asked, how do people know that, why do people assume that they aren't creative? There's a self-defeating prophecy sometimes that people put out where they think they can't aspire to the Steve Jobs or the great creative thinkers.
Yeah, so it really comes down to societal conditioning, societal expectations. So if you think about the last 50 years of public education, really we've sort of been focused on preparing people for sort of white collar but highly routine jobs. Like think about accounting or law or any of these fields. That's really been the education system designed around, or finance, for example. And so the result is that there's been sort of a cultural norm that creativity means poverty, right? There's this sort of, at least in America, there's this sort of meme about oh, you got an English degree, you'll become a barista, which is both not true and also offensive. But the idea is that we sort of condition an entire, multiple generations now at this point to think that creativity is bad. Creativity means poverty. Creativity means not being able to feed your family. But the crazy thing is that we're moving into a world where, because of AI, because of automation, actually those white collar jobs are some of the ones most being automated. And if you look at, for example, Fortune 500 CEOs, what you find is that actually liberal arts degrees is one of the most prominent degrees you find, because ultimately those are the skills, the creative skills, that are actually truly future-proof. Those are the ones that'll take the longest to get automated.
Makes sense. Awesome. So Alan, I wish I could keep asking you questions. We do have some more in the chat. So ideally, Alan, if possible, before you leave, if you could go to the chat and just answer any specific questions, that would be great. But thank you again. Let's give a virtual round of applause to Allen Gannett. Thank you very much. Lovely. All right, coming up next, we have Mario. So I actually didn't know Mario before this event, and I'm very happy that in the progress of setting this event up, RDB, the DMZ, and Trufan were able to work together, and I was able to meet Mario. I think he has a wealth of experience. He's extremely hardworking. I don't think he actually goes to sleep. But at the same time, he's someone that I am looking forward to hearing from. So Mario, the floor is yours. 15 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Swish, and thank you, Alan. Great session. Thank you, everybody, for joining. My name is Mario Alonzo-Debout. I founded and still run RDB, a marketing agency that is specialized on purpose. And today we're going to talk about purpose, at least as much as it's possible in 10 minutes. Maybe Swish gives me 11. What is purpose? That's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at why purpose is so important, and especially how can something like purpose guide you in these very difficult times. And I think we're all aware they are. We're going to look at how purpose works in times of crisis and how it counterweights kind of everything dragging down on the Maslow pyramid of needs. And then I'm quickly going to touch on how purpose will be implemented across 4 layers of intervention. So how can you actually activate it and make it work for you? And then we're going to quickly discuss on how we can innovate around your purpose. But I would say before we talk about the good things, I want to put some emphasis on this. We've been affected by COVID-19 personally in Australia for 4 weeks. So far, according to McKinsey, half of all US businesses, and I guess North American businesses, have been affected. And I'm pretty sure the rest of the 50% will also be affected. So it's really now about us finding ways on how to channel our energy, how to stay focused, and how to act as leaders, as business owners, in the best way we can, and find something that we can hold on to. And me personally, in like the last 7 years, or maybe even longer, I was always at my best when I was acting according to my personal purpose. And I could always see my company does well when it acted upon its purpose, right? Because it gives you something that you can hold on to. It reflects your values, and it also reflects your strategy. But what is purpose in general? I mean, purpose, quite simply, is a motive, a cause, the reason why. I think the reason why is also another expression that got famous through Apple. Always focus on the reason why. And mainly it is hopefully the reason why your company actually came into existence, right? What is the ultimate reason why you started your company? And I feel that this crisis really brings us back to reminding us on why did we do this in the first place, right? And I mentioned it, we got this. I feel that no one else than entrepreneurs and creatives are equipped with the tools and the skills right now to get through this. Resilience, creativity, commitment are the things that will help us guide through this crisis. And if we are clear on our purpose and on why we do the things we do and what's the reason behind it, I think it will be way easier for us to see, okay, if I take decisions, are these decisions reflecting on my purpose? I always like to bring up one example to define or to explain on how purpose works in the business context. Imagine you're the CEO of a toothbrush company, right? So everything you do is built upon, or is built so that you can sell better, cheaper, faster, and more toothbrushes. Now, people who are deep into strategy and who know the principle of reason why or purpose know that selling toothbrushes is a how and is a what, right? It defines your product, it defines your services, but it rarely defines the reason why. And that's exactly where purpose comes in. It's something that is bigger and that opens up worlds. We like to call it at RDB, we build worlds around purpose. That keeps you focused on the challenge and more on why you do something instead of the how or what you do. So if I would be the CEO of that toothbrush company, and I know I basically need to innovate and I need to transform my business, and I feel I'm back to constraints from Allen, I feel like I'm constrained by what I do instead of why I do something, I would ask myself those 5 questions. So first, why did I start my business in the first place? When I started, what did I want to change? In RDB's case, when I started, and that's why it's called Robin Hood, I really wanted to change the industry and find a way on how communication can drive meaningful impact. Think about your target market, right? What is the change your audience wants to see? And what strengths, or what I call the bag of experience, what experiences, what insights, what unique skill sets can you bring in that differentiate you for the others and that can help you actually create change and impact? And what would you like your audience to know you for, right? Often when we talk about purpose, we also talk about heritage and sustainability. So it's a long-term thing. So if I would be that CEO of that toothbrush company, I would probably, and this has just been assembled in a day, so I'm sure there are some smarter guys than me who could do this even better, but I would look at the first thing, which is my purpose statement. And instead of saying, I'm going to sell as many toothbrushes as I can, I say, I improve humanity's dental hygiene to drive better teeth and personal well-being. And immediately you can see your purpose opens up a new spectrum, right? And my vision will become a world of healthy smiles across all spectrums of society. So I have an inclusive part in there. And my mission becomes develop and make accessible world-class dental hygiene products. So it's more than just toothbrushes. And then the ambition, and here I want to be very clear in these special times of need. If you act on your purpose, your ambition is more on the impact than you create than on the growth, right? So if you create positive impact for 500 people, that's as good as if you create impact for 5 million people, as long as you do the best you can and as long as you act upon your purpose. But that's just my personal opinion. So now we have the challenge that we face a severe time of crisis, right? And if you like, everybody's first reaction in terms of crisis is to go back into their shell, to hide in their caves and wait until this is over. So if you want to be more scientific about it, if you look at the Maslow pyramid of needs, everybody steps at least at the beginning a ladder down on that pyramid and goes down to the bottom where it's all about physiological needs like food, water, sleep, and it's all about safety. And the challenge, and I think Allen can confirm that, if we're in these brackets, creativity, innovation, and other things tend to die because we don't have the support system and we don't have the creative energy and the energy we need to talk about community, to talk about self-expression, to talk about innovation, if you like. So we feel that purpose is a counterbalance, especially in time of need, if you clearly define what that is for you, that can move you up on that ladder and actually can bring you out of the lethargy or on what should be the next step that I do, because it becomes something bigger than yourself and it opens up an ecosystem. So this is kind of complicated, but everything starts with purpose. I'll make it simpler. I'm going to show you how we think you can integrate purpose into 4 layers of intervention. So the first one, and I think the most important one, because this is your foundation, your basis is your culture. Within the company, it's all about how you treat your employees, how you work with your employees, how you work with your community. We at RDB immediately recognized that mental health and well-being will be even more of importance. So we introduced mental health days. We support small and medium businesses as today on the best practices and the learnings we have. And then we immediately integrated HR to act upon our purpose and see how we can help our employees to get through these times. And even our leadership, free consultation services, all these things, in order to keep us sane and keep us as high as possible on that Maslow pyramid. In terms of brand and communication, we can see that through purpose, that more and more, consumers will be loyal to brands that really added value in this time of crisis. We can see that our employees, and we can see this across the board, are really becoming, if you act upon your values and your purpose, really are becoming ambassadors for you, and they will give their utmost to support you. So again, you're not alone in this. We can see that organic content is picking up, share rates are going up, engagement rates are going up. So really make sure that you leverage your channels from social to owned to website to communicate on your purpose, to reach out to other members of the community and see how you can tackle this together, right? Because community is so important now. And then in terms of product innovation, if we take that toothbrush example again, suddenly it becomes about, dental health care. So now you could think about, hey, is there a way how I can offer free consultation online? Is there a way how I can team up in terms of shared value with NGOs and partners that act also upon my purpose? So the nice thing is purpose helps you elevate to the why, and it opens up new worlds so that maybe your how and the what might be a bit different. So I don't know where I'm in terms of time, but if you have more questions, we really spent the last 4 weeks to put together a ton of content on what we learned and how we can support others. So from initiatives like this to how you can leverage messaging services to create effective management, how you can leverage purpose. And then I think for some of you, it might be really interesting. We created a knowledge hub that kind of has templates and toolkits on crisis communication and how to leverage purpose for CSR and other activities. Feel free to reach out, to drop me a message. You can find me on any channel, or Swish can forward you my contacts. I hope that was insightful and gave you a bit of an idea on how purpose works. Stay safe, and you guys got this. We'll get through this.
Lovely. Thank you, Mario. A round of applause virtually again.
Thank you, guys.
I love it. Great talk. As I said in the chat, guys, what's going to happen is Mario and Karen actually have a bunch of links and resources, some of which they've alluded to. So we're going to take that. We're going to take the summary notes and the recording of the event and send all three to you guys after the event. So you guys will have everything to work off from. Mario will be answering questions with Karen after Karen goes. So feel free to continue to drop questions in for Mario as well as for Karen. I'll pick some that are relevant for both, and they'll answer it right after. So Karen O'Brien, I don't know how to make this introduction, even close to the amount of experience that she has, but she's a global marketing executive. Has worked at numerous companies, including Western Union, as well as Signet Jewelers. She's also our first investor to Trufan. So literally a month into thinking about the idea with my co-founder, Anik, Karen came on board and backed us. So we're very appreciative of her. I think you guys are going to enjoy what she has to say on marketing. So Karen, the floor is yours.
I don't have any slides today because having 10 minutes and talking about such a large area like marketing and content, really, I couldn't go there. But what I'm going to do is just give you some very actionable, easy things that you can do immediately to create content for your marketing. And I've spent the last couple weeks looking at thousands of posts from small business owners and entrepreneurs, some of them very heartbreaking, some people trying to figure out, like, how do I go digital? They've had an old school business. They're trying to figure out really how to do digital or social marketing, and others where they are just rocking it. And they're awesome examples of really, making the best of what they've got in this time. So first and foremost, if you don't have a digital presence as a business owner, if you don't have a website, if you don't have a strong social presence, there's never a better time to step up and do that as right now. And so I've even seen, entrepreneurs and business owners scrambling to try and figure out to let us know or let everyone know in their customer base what's changed in their business. So business hours might have changed, their business model might have changed. Very close to me, I saw a restaurant who basically took their entire huge menu down to literally one meal a day. And they have like a family pack you can go and pick up for $20, and it's delicious. And their message was really about help us not have to lay off our employees, help us be here after this is all over. And here's what we've done for the community to help you be able to have easy, nutritious meals throughout this. So there's a lot of really sort of inventive ways to kind of take your digital presence down to something simple, something that's going to help drive a win-win for you and your customers. I think, you really need to keep your objectives in mind, right? You don't want to just be creating content for the sake of creating content. You want to still have an objective. And I don't want to go too much into storytelling because we have other speakers who are going to do that. But, do you need to drive traffic to your website? Have you had to shut your business down completely and you just want to stay top of mind so when this all opens up, that your customers are still thinking about you? I've seen a lot of great content from, example, nail salons who have had to completely shut down, but they are giving tips on how to keep your nails, from going too bad during this time. And then also at the same time saying, hey, we're still taking reservations and appointments for July because we think things are going to open up then. And we can do that by email or whatever. So really keeping your objective in mind, being focused, I think is still very important. If we go to actual content creation, like how can you do that easily, cost effectively today? So, user-generated content is one area that I think a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners are using really effectively right now. So they're leveraging their customers, they're leveraging their community, they're leveraging their employees to create content, authentic content around the business, around their products, and they're leveraging that on a daily basis. And I think, arguably it is the most authentic and potentially storytelling kind of content that you can put out there right now. I would also say I've seen a ton of really good throwback content from small business owners, especially those business owners who have a legacy in their community and in their neighborhood. And being able to say, you know, we've had a third generation business. Here's how my grandmother started the business, or here's how I started the business. Here's my story as an entrepreneur. That kind of throwback content can also be really easily accessed and very fun and engaging for people. I think also empowering your employees. Your employees actually have time to create content right now. And, you know, this is never a better time to engage the Gen Z or millennial on your team that can help you really create content. Writing articles and blog posts, I think I see a lot of small business owners doing that, and it's a very effective way to create that long form content and tell your story. Videos, I think a lot of entrepreneurs are learning how to go live in this environment. It's not easy. It's not comfortable, but step out of your comfort zone, because there's two forms of content that we see in social that or in digital all up that are some of the most engaged. One is stories, and then the other one is live streaming. Those two are, if you could do nothing else, would actually get you the most engagement all up today, at least statistically, from what we see. And then lastly, leveraging influencers and brand advocates. So, you know, those folks love your brand or are in your community that you can leverage are some of the easiest people that you can actually access. Not to plug Trufan too much, but you can access those people through Trufan, and we do have a 45-day free trial for any businesses that want to try it out right now to help out small businesses and entrepreneurs. And there's also finally a ton of free resources out there. Shutterstock, for example, I don't advocate using stock photography as a basis for your content, but they do have some free resources right now for business owners. And of course, Allen mentioned GIFs and memes. Who doesn't love that? So those are just a few ideas out there, and that was sort of all I wanted to share. If we have any questions, I'd love to.
Perfect. Oh, Karen, we get?
Yeah, that was somebody else, not me.
Oh, okay, yeah. I thought that was you. I was like, oh, whoa. What did that say?
Bless you.
Bless you, yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate it. Another virtual round of applause. I feel like I'm the only one doing it now, but that's fine. So a couple of questions for Karen and for Mario. Anyone can answer this. The first question is on TikTok, which Karen, you know, agitates me, but that's fine. The question is, I'm not the only person over 30 who downloaded TikTok this month. Can you speak to marketing on this platform with the time constraint that we're under?
I mean, I personally love TikTok because I think it's a blank canvas for creativity. And I think when you get something on TikTok that suits the platform, in other words, it's you know, fun, it's musically oriented, and it's going to fit the audience that is on TikTok, you have the potential to have massive engagement on it. So I think that's kind of the upside of it. Building a presence on that platform is not that hard right now. And so, you know, hashtag throwdowns, creating the content with licensed music, it could be quite effective.
Cool. Anything to add there, Mario?
I was muted. I had it muted on the microphone and on screen. Double mute. I think I would focus on where you have your community right now, right? So I think now it's really essential to focus on the core of your community. If that community is built on Facebook, that's where I start from. If it's on Instagram, that's where I start from. If it's on TikTok, that's where I start from. It's really about activating your core brand ambassadors and start a communication with them and then build out from there. So we saw we're most effective if we grow our community through the community of our community, if you like, right? So it's almost like a snowball system. And one tip on creating content, and even myself, even though I've been in the industry for 15 years, I always hesitated to put content out there. I was afraid of who's interested in it, you know, what am I saying that no one else is saying? But I realized that there's such a need for stories, for content, and for connection that if you are able to just translate what you do on a daily basis, right? If you set up a memo for your employees, think about how you can set it up as a blog post at the same time. If you consult the client on something, think about how you can transform that into a blog post at the same time. That way, you don't create a lot of additional work. You just start to reshaping on how you attack content, and then it just gets way easier. And when you start putting it out there, you will see your community grows, your traffic grows, you will see new opportunities, but it's really a process of activating your community and growing it from there. I think everything that's not relevant and goes to mass scale at this time of crisis is really difficult.
Got it. Cool. And then final question for both of you. If you haven't built a following online beyond your website, what's the secret sauce to quickly gaining followers? A message that isn't heard isn't worth writing, ... Or is it? So up to you guys.
I think going back to Mario's point, you need to know where your customers are. And, you know, about 60% of small businesses in the US and Canada are on Facebook properties, either Instagram, Messenger, or Facebook. So that's always a good place to start. It depends on what your business is and who your customers are. But I would always start with where your customers are. And then I would start with building authentic storytelling and engaging content. You can't go wrong with that.
And if you're lucky and you already have a website that has a lot of traffic, or already the core of your consumer base, that's actually perfect, because now you can start retargeting and lookaliking. What that means is you can work with Facebook to identify what kind of people are coming to your website, and then you can target people that are similar to those. So that actually is a benefit or an advantage, because a lot of people are trying to drive people to the website to identify who is relevant. If you already have some audience on the website, you will actually have a easier time to find the right audience on social to talk to.
Lovely. All right, guys. Thank you so much again to Mario and to Karen. If you guys continue to have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. I know they'll be active in it as well. There was a question, by the way, from Mark. So if you guys want to go in and answer that over chat, that would be great. But we're going to move on. I believe we have Mr. Ron Tite in the building. Ron is an incredible storyteller. He is someone that I regard, honestly, as one of the best speakers that I've at least seen live. And I am super excited for him to talk about storytelling, the work that he's done with church and state, and some of his experiences over the last few years. So Ron, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Swish. That sets up a lot. This is going to suck now. Everyone's going to be like, I thought this was going to be good. He's good live. Oh, but on Zoom, it's a very different matter. And I should be honest here that 1 month ago, on Friday the 13th, my wife and I welcomed our second son into this world. And if there ever was an apocalyptic time to bring a child into the world, this is it, my friends. It has been a bit of a chaotic month. That door may open with any number of things. Who knows? My guess is it's going to be a diaper filled with crap. But we will prevail. Now, 1 week ago, I think it was 6 days ago, something happened that I thought was, one of the most important business stories that occurred. And it's this one. And you may have seen this. This was the photo that was shared out by Purolator. Now, for those, I know we have some of our American friends on the line, and so you may not know the significance of this. But at this point, a week ago, we were concerned in Canada about 3M being able to get masks into our frontline healthcare workers via a couple of their distribution centers in the U.S. and overseas. And there's big, people were nervous about this, and people were afraid for this. And there were political issues, and there were health issues, and there are emotional issues around this. And this one photo was the best corporate story to tell in that moment. Because 6 days ago, the 500,000 masks from 3M ended up in a distribution warehouse for Purolator. And Purolator was there. And everything that Purolator needed to do to position themselves both in this time, in the COVID time for growth, and more importantly, to position themselves so that they had great momentum coming out of this chaotic time. This is the approach that they took. Now, I think that's really important to talk about here because we are navigating the unknown, but we are also setting ourselves up for great momentum when we come out of this. Now, for those speed racing fans, I'm not one of them, but what I'm told is that race car drivers, if you know, you may slow down as you enter a corner, but as you leave the corner, you accelerate. You accelerate, you put the pedal to the metal, as they used to say in 1977, as you come out of the corner so that you can get your momentum and keep control coming out of it. So that's what we have to position ourselves to do. That's what they did right here. Such a wonderful story that positioned them as they were the choice. That somebody, whoever made the decision, who needed a critical delivery, they chose Purolator. It was also something that reinforced a purpose. And full disclosure, I did some speaking for them before this period, I think in February. And I know that their core belief is why they exist is to make Canada stronger, to make Canadian businesses stronger. And this does that beautifully. And so they not only had the photo, but then they tweeted out. And so this is the story that they're telling. One, great news. They lead with positivity. Secondly, factual information. They just received the first shipment of the 500,000 masks. Then they move into the actions that they specifically are going to take. They're going to work quickly so that they get into the hands of healthcare workers. And then lastly, as they talk about this with great humility, they thank leaders from all sides of the political spectrum and all levels of government. And their dedicated employees. All that wrapped in with their core purpose as the thread through all of it. This is a beautiful and amazing story. And this is why this is absolutely critical at this time. Now, I see Sharon is here and Stephen Dorsey's in there. And people who've seen me speak before know that I talk about this world that we're all living in, where in Times Square, that this is where the Canadian consumer and the Canadian B2B client is living right now. That this is a place where they're getting bombarded by messages from up top, which is the establishment who has the money to be there, and from down below, the street level entrepreneurs who are coming up with new and interesting ways to solve your problems. And those people down on the street, well, we're not exactly sure if they're going to be there tomorrow. We're not exactly sure how they make their money. And so the result of this is we're standing here and we don't know where to look and we don't know who to trust. Now, that still exists in this COVID period. It's actually heightened even more because we're getting a blurring of these lines because established businesses that are up top, they're now exploring new business models, as should you. And the people who are down below who already explored those new business models are being forced to pivot into new and interesting areas. We're not exactly sure whether people have expertise in certain areas, whether they can deliver. So we don't know where to look and we don't know who to trust. So how do we get around that? Well, how we get around it, of course, is to use stories. This is what we need to do. Now, a couple of key points here. Sorry, I'm just gonna do that. And this is the Times Square that we're talking about. We're competing against people who are brands who are constantly sending out communications to people. And so, people are saying this, my health and safety is my top priority of so many brands. I never even knew I had my personal email address. Or, you know what? I love this one. Delete email accounts, sell house, live in the woods, find a bottle in a river, has a note inside, our brand's COVID-19 response and pledge to our customers. So people are being inundated from all sides of Times Square from people saying, we care for you. Oh, do we? We care for you so much. So now what do we do? And I'm realizing here that I got to stop the share. See, I told you this, right? This was gonna, there we go. Okay. You're being judged, of course, by your actions. I'm just gonna go this way. Okay, there we go. So you're being judged by your actions, of course. And how do you talk about those actions? How can we come up with a story that works for this? Well, you know, one of the most important parts of storytelling is actually having a great story to tell. This is critically important. And we've spent a lot of time telling people how to tell great stories and not enough time talking about the things they need to do to generate great stories. And so what do we need to do when we're generating those stories? We need to focus on three things based on what we think, what we do, and what we say. And if you're thinking I'm using that platform because I have a book called Think, Do, Say, you'd be right. Yes, this is the ultimate pitch slap coming to all of you. But it is. The great stories are based on what you think, what you do, and what you say. The think part, of course, well, this is your purpose. This is why you exist as an organization, and this should have had, you should have had this conversation before this existed, because it's never been more important. Some of you may know that Milton Friedman wrote the social responsibility is to increase its profits. And in last August, the Business Roundtable, made up of 180 CEOs representing 35% of the total market cap in the US, looked at this and said, this needs to change because we do not have one stakeholder. We do not have the shareholder. We have five. We have five stakeholders. And those five are our shareholders, our customers, our employees, and the community that we operate, and our partners, sorry. So our customers, our employees, our partners, our shareholders, and the community that we operate. This was last August. These conversations were already happening, that you needed to stand for something more. You need to have a purpose. And my friends, if there was ever a time to double down on purpose, this is it. And if the stories you're telling do not have a thread of what you believe as an organization, then those stories aren't going to resonate. And people will say it's about our values, and it's not just about your values, because you have to balance out what you believe with what you do to reinforce those values. Those are the key parts of the story. What actions have taken place or will take place? When Purolator said, we are going to work as quickly as possible to get these into the hands of the people that need them, that was the most important part of that story, the actions. Yeah. So it's not just about your values and what you believe, because if you're a financial organization, not naming any names, and you say banking with us is like sitting in a green comfy leather chair, and then I show up and that's the chair. My friends, we're gonna have some issues here. And of course, TD is a wonderful organization, a absolutely wonderful organization who is doing amazing things for their customers right now. I do that just to take a joke, but the actions we take will dictate the stories that we can tell. Now, some of you, Karen was talking earlier about some background stories and some brands, and this is one that I loved about the founder of an organization. Everything you can see here is absolutely lovely, and that of course is Pusateri's. And Pusateri's was the one who said that who priced some cleaning wipes at $29.99 a family. Again, I'm not saying that Pusateri's is a horrible organization. I'm sure that something went wrong here. I don't think they were consciously out to screw people over. But if we don't act in a way that reinforces our belief, the stories will be told about us, opposed to us leading the stories. And Andrew D'Souza just joined us. He's on deck. Hello, Andrew. We know that we need to do this. We need to act. But we do. What do we do? Well, we have to take actions, and they have to star in our stories. The first thing is, well, who the heck are you doing it for? Who are the specific people who are featured in your story and that they are for? We need to call out people by name. This makes them real. Dove did some beautiful work of frontline healthcare workers and how this beauty is courageous, but they called them out by name. This is Amanda and Patricia. We need to know who specifically you're talking about. And who is it for, and how can you tailor your story for that particular audience? The second thing is, well, what do they want you to do? And this is why you will dictate the actions that you talk about in your story, the things that they really want to hear your organization is doing. And what they say, of course, is shut up and solve my problem. And no time like now, because people are quarantined, they're at home, you need to solve their problems. And normally, when we look at this, and I actually use Andrew's organization, Clearbanc, when I do live keynotes about, Bob, where are you going? You just getting up and walking away? I can see you. You're just getting up. You're petting a dog. Okay. But I use Clearbanc as an organization that solved the entrepreneur's problem of having to give up equity to get cash and capital to grow their business. Well, of course, the problems have now changed. We look at, disruptive organizations who have solved problems, but now the problems have changed because we can look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs is to indicate what problems really need to be solved and what problems should be in your stories. Now, I did a phys ed degree, I own an agency, and I have a background in comedy. I never thought I would ever use Maslow's hierarchy of needs outside of Psych 101. Yet, here we are. That's the crazy time we're in. But we know that the stuff at the top end of the pyramid is less important now than the stuff at the bottom. So what should be starring in your stories? It's those bottom three things. That's what people need. The love and belonging. That's why the Dove work was so great. Thirdly, who do you do it with? Who allows you to deliver on the things that you do? And these are your partners, and these are your suppliers, and these are your associates, and these are your team members. One of our clients is Walmart Canada, full disclosure. And the social media posts that are most popular and most engaging for Walmart customers are when we showcase associates, because these are the people who are at the front line. These are important parts of your stories, and these are the people you do it with. Now, the third part of this, if you believe in something more important and you, as an organization, take actions and those actions appear in your stories, well, the last thing we need to do is we need to talk about them. But what is the tone of our stories when we talk about them during this really sensitive period? That's the say. We do need to say them. We need to say them consistently, but we need to say them with humility. This isn't a time to feature our competition in our stories of here's what we're doing and here's what our competition is doing. This is not the time for that. You actually need to put your purpose ahead of your profit. You need to put your purpose ahead of your profit. Now more time than ever. I was the creative director on Volvo for many years, and we all know that Volvo is known as the safest vehicle. That is certainly the legacy of that brand. And Volvo came out, and I mean, there's no better example than we're going to put our purpose before our profit. Then right now, the safest place to be isn't in a Volvo. That's a nice story captured in one line of what they firmly believe, but more importantly, the humility in delivering that message. I mean, Jeep just told us it's time to explore the great indoors opposed to the outdoors. Again, lovely, great stories. And, there's a lot of brands are coming out with social distancing messaging. And I have an opinion on that, and I will stop this share because this is where I stand on it. People saying, should we be doing social distancing messaging or other information that helps with the lead safety message or lead healthcare messaging? And some people are saying, I don't want to hear from brands. I say, no, we do want to hear from brands. Clearly, people aren't getting this message. And so if you can take a story for your loyal audience, for your loyal customers, don't use it as an acquisition tool. Use it as a retention tool. And you can use, whether it's social distancing or stay-at-home messaging or stop the spreading of misinformation. And you can, in a clever way, customize that message for your audience using your voice, and you help deliver that message on behalf of the greater good. Well, that's fantastic. The hierarchy, and I'll finish here. Swish is nodding, saying yes. Let's roll. Is the hierarchy of the three stories? I think the first one is how are you taking your manufacturing environment, your assembly line environment, the products that you make, to pivot that into so you can manufacture goods that are for the greater good. Can you go from doing booze into hand sanitizer? It's a great story. And I think it's what you should do as a marketer. That's first and foremost. Secondly, if you can't do that, And a lot of us can't. I'm an ad agency. I can't crank out 1 million surgical masks. But the second thing is, can you use your brand legacy and your audience to tell the story that reinforces key healthcare messages on behalf of the greater good? And then the third part is, what problems can you now solve that your customers really, really need you to solve? And how have you done it, or how will you do it? That's a great story. That's a great story you need to tell. That's a great story that people want to hear. But remember, it's not about how you tell it. It's about generating great stories to tell.
Lovely. That was amazing. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that. Virtual round of applause for Ron Tite. And there's a lot of content there, which I love. So I wrote everything down, put it together. But if you guys have any questions for Ron, I know he's going to stick around for a little bit. So feel free to drop it into the chat. And Andrew and Ron are going to answer questions together right after Andrew's talk. So next up, we do have Andrew D'Souza, the CEO of Clearbanc. Clearbanc is one of the fastest growing businesses in the world, not just in Canada. They're pretty much synonymous now with raising money without giving ownership away, with no personal guarantees. Andrew is a phenomenal person. He's an early investor in Trufan. He's someone that I look to always for any advice around fundraising as well as culture. So that's what he's going to be talking about. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Appreciate it. I thought this was just a birthday party for you, Swish. So I didn't come prepared to give a talk or anything. So I don't have a slide presentation, but I'm happy to talk about, really what we've gone through at Clearbanc, switching to a remote team, leading through a remote team. We've had to make some tough decisions. We've had to make some real pivots, but also happy to answer questions that you guys have. Feel free to drop them in real time. And Swish, if you have ideas or things you want me to elaborate on, but, I think, caught the last little bit of Ron's presentation. And I think, the idea of staying, incredibly true to who you are. And this is an opportunity for all of us to come back to be like, why it's way easier just to shut down your business right now and wait until this whole thing blows over and then relaunch it. Right. And so, I think the important thing to think about is, why do you exist? Why did you get into this in the first place? Because as a founder, as an entrepreneur, it's like, this is why you start a company, is for is to push through when times become really hard, because you think you want to see a change in the world and you believe that needs to exist. And that's the reason that your teams follow you into times like this. And so for me, and for our team, for Clearbanc, I had spent a lot of my career raising capital. I spent a lot of my career getting on planes, flying to Silicon Valley in New York, pitching investors who didn't really understand my business, to give up huge parts of ownership, and then manage boards. And I'd been fired by a board. I'd been pushed by boards to make probably what I didn't think were the right decisions for the company. And I think. And then Michelle, my partner, had sort of the opposite experience, right? She had bootstrapped all of her previous companies, hadn't had access to capital, or when she didn't get it on the terms that she wanted. And so when she sold her last company, became an investor on Dragon's Den, and we're seeing hundreds of entrepreneurs every year that were basically raising capital to fund sales and marketing and shipping and repeatable things. And so we started Clearbanc with the idea that, if you have a partner that's really investing in your business, and they're truly funding R&D and a long-term high-risk investment, that's great. That's a great equity partner. But once you've figured things out, and once you're investing in ads, or you're investing in salespeople, or you're investing in infrastructure or shipping and things that are pretty repeatable, it starts to feel very expensive, both from a time perspective and from a cost perspective. And so, especially in today's environment, where VCs might be pulling back, banks and other sources of capital might be pulling back when entrepreneurs really need them. We want to be there to be an alternative, right? And to shift that balance of power and say, for founders going through the toughest times, you may not even need to work with us, but the fact that we exist and the fact that we're an alternative gives you a foot to stand on when you're going into a negotiation with your existing investors. Or, you don't just have to take whatever terms they give you. You're like, well, Clearbanc is there as well, and maybe I can, maybe I have another alternative to work through it. So, so like Ron was saying, we've introduced this revenue-based financing product where we don't take equity and we just take a rev share until we get our money back. And and I've been pretty vocal. Our team is a team of founders. Our team is, we hire a lot of former entrepreneurs, people that have lived and breathed and experienced this problem, and it resonates with them. And we've never, we started the company, we started in San Francisco, we moved back to Toronto. We actually, until we were 12 or 15 people, we were working out of this condo. This is basically like where Michelle and I live. And so we've been a very high contact company. There's an energy in our office. We haven't really had the systems and the structures to be able to like communicate remotely. We haven't really like hired people who we needed to be remote, and had success with that. And so, because we have a lot of like random hallway conversations, and you walk by somebody's desk and be like, hey, have you thought about this? And that's where the magic happens. We haven't had the structured communications to do this. And so it was a shock for us about a month ago when we thought we were going to do a single test day. We're like, hey, let's test working remotely and see what breaks. And that day was the day that like the NBA shut down and Tom Hanks got like literally, and that evening we're like, we're not going back. And so it was, it was sort of a trial by fire from a culture standpoint and a communication standpoint. I still don't think we've totally figured it out. We've sort of hacked it. So instead of us saying we're going to get really good at written communication and structures, we've just tried to replicate, the in-person. So we do a daily 20-minute all hands at 5 o'clock every day. And Michelle and I just talk about, what's on our mind, what we're seeing in the world, how we're thinking about how the company will navigate. We do a lot of sort of Zoom rooms, or use Tandem, which is sort of like a Discord or Tandem type thing, to have people sort of, tangentially together while they're remote. And we just pick up the phone, do a bunch of video calls and Slack calls to try and have, those sort of random in-person conversations. And that's worked pretty well. But it has been, it's certainly been an adjustment for us. And I don't think we've gotten it perfect. But I do think that a lot of the team has the initial energy, there was a lot of, I think, novelty to it. So people were very energized. Now we realize we're in it for the long haul, and we're sort of dealing with that. I've noticed that there's a bifurcation of the team. There's people who have kids that are just like absolutely insane and can't get a minute to themselves. And there's people who live alone who are like really feeling the social isolation. And there's people who live with their partners like Michelle and I, who are like sometimes at each other's throats, but sometimes very fortunate to feel very fortunate to have each other during this time. But I think that's one of the most important things that we realized is, you don't always know what's going on, in the back of someone's mind, right? You don't know what else is going on in their, with their personal life, with their psyche. And so everybody's a little bit on edge. Everybody's a little bit more anxious. And so it can get, especially through Slack and written communications, we all know this. If you get an email or a text message, you can read it the wrong way. People are much more inclined to do that in today's environment, where temperatures are just up, like people are just under much more pressure, and they're more on edge. And so, so our goal was, just have a little bit of that empathy, whether it's your customers, your partners, your colleagues, your coworkers. Recognize they may be coming from a very different headspace than you're sitting in. And have a little bit of that empathy. It's also really interesting because you get a lot more intimacy with your colleagues or even your customers and partners, because you see them in their home, right? You see them with their pets and their kids and all of that stuff, and you can establish that much more closely. For us, we realized what we could either do was we could wait and we could batten down the hatches and say, hey, many other folks in our space certainly that are putting out risk capital have sort of stopped. We look at this as an opportunity for us to gain ground and really accelerate into this. And so we set up, like a set of 4 initiatives. We align the company around a series of 4 initiatives that will allow us to accelerate into this. As part of that, we had to basically restructure the company around those 4 initiatives. And so I don't know, some of you guys may have seen this yesterday, but it was actually a very, very tough decision. But we had to let go of 17 people on the team, where we tried to find roles from the majority of the team as we were restructuring around a couple of different initiatives, but weren't able to find roles for everybody. It's sort of a new reality. When we came into this, we knew that we were going to be, we were hoping that we'd bounce back, and it might be a quarter of a bit of a downturn. We might be back at work in, a few weeks to a month. That's seeming less likely. It'll probably be months before we're back in the office. And probably at least the rest of the year before the economy and things get back to normal in terms of, you know, the uncertainty and the impact. And so we realized we needed to make some real structural changes. And you know, many of you guys may have already gone through this, maybe thinking about this. You know, I think it was, I felt very humbled. It was heartbreaking for sure. You know, having these conversations with everybody, you know, people really, it was humbling because they were really believers in the mission, and still big supporters. And to the rest of the team, you know, we had to be, you know, we were pretty transparent and communicated the decision and why. But as part of it, I think what I was humbled by was people sort of rallied around and said, look, these were, you know, these people are our family and they're our friends. They're always going to be part of the story. And it's on us now to make sure the Clearbanc is a bright spot in their in whatever they do, right? They'll be able to look back. And if we give up now, and if we don't achieve our mission and we don't achieve actually what, you know, the opportunity that's ahead of us, then we're doing all of those people sort of a disservice, because we want, like, I want people to look back and say, even if I was only here for a few months, you know, like, I was part of this story, right? And now, like, Clearbanc has built this great company, and the fact that I was part of that story during the early days means something, and that I'll be able to hold on to for the rest of my career. And I'm always going to be an alumni, and I want that to mean something, and that's on sort of all of us at the team to be able to go out and do it. So, so I think that, you know, that was a surprise to see how people sort of rallied around that. It was really inspiring for me. It was very humbling for me. And it was something that, you know, I spent a lot of yesterday evening sort of digesting and got me out of bed in the morning, you know, in a much better state of mind. Yeah, a couple of other things that we've done. Happy to take some questions here. You know, so we launched a product last week, really because we heard the feedback from our customers. You know, similar to what Ron was saying, like, we wanted to be authentic to us. We didn't want to be like, we're profiteering, but we're sort of like, hey, our positioning in the market has been, you know, fund your growth, fund your customer acquisition without giving up equity. And that is not the headspace that a lot of our customers are in. A lot of our customers are in the survival mode. They're like, hey, how do I, you know, their boards or their investors or just their teams and employees are saying, you know, how do I make it out of this? How do I extend runway? How do I reduce burn? And so we reframed our product. We launched a new product that was really focused around runway. And it was really this idea that we're going to help you. You know, I know that it's something that for every CEO is on your mind, is like, my cash burn and runway. We want to help you navigate that, and be a partner in designing a program to be able to extend your runway. And that was really well received. And we were really careful. You know, even our PR firm was like, we want to go bigger with this. And we were just sort of like, look, we just want to be like, this is just feedback from the market. You know, it's not about, we don't want to be like big and loud about it. We just want to say we're here. And we know that times are tough, and we want to just be a tool in your toolkit as you're navigating these tough times. We don't want to be loud in sort of this environment. So we did a small exclusive piece where we talked about it, and then we just, you know, we sent it out to our customer base and our extended network. And I think that's the real challenge, I think, for everybody who's trying to run their business, you know, during this time, is people are looking for bright stories and they're looking for hope. But it's important to just sort of be aware and sensitive to the zeitgeist and the dynamic and the headspace of folks, and always, you know, our inclination has been always err on the side of being more conservative, even if it means being a bit quieter about a product launch or a new initiative or a marketing campaign. We've erred on the side of being quieter. And then Michelle and I personally, on our own personal socials and things like that, have been very vocal about, you know, some of the health initiatives that we focused on, and you know, just like getting people to stay the fuck home, getting people to you know, to wear a mask going outside and things like that. And so those have been some of the things that we've used our personal platforms rather than our corporate platform to really amplify. But yeah, that's, you know, just spoke for 10 or 15 minutes here, but happy to chat about questions. I've seen a few come through the chat. I don't think there's anything you want me to touch on specifically, or there's some good questions in here for Ron, but happy to dive into some of those.
Cool. Thank you, Andrew. A quick virtual round of applause. Final time we'll probably do it. So thank you for that. So questions kind of for each of you. I think we'll start off with Ron. I actually really like this last question that Andrew put out. There are many brands who were virtue signaling at the beginning of this, lots of empty communications like you mentioned. Are there any other watch outs in the next period while SMBs have to consider how they communicate with their customer?
Yeah, I mean, I think the things that we're proud about, we have to ensure, because those are default stories, right? Guess what we did? Look what we did. And if those actions don't serve a greater good or don't serve a customer that is desperately in need of a service, then that just kind of gets in the way. And this is not the time for chest beating at all. At the same time, I think we can't shy away from this. Now, when you look at all the work from a marketing perspective from past recessions, and I know we're not in a recession right now, and I'm no economist, but I know we all think that one is going to follow. But those organizations that invest and continue to market, say, through the recession are the ones, again, who accelerate as they come out the turn and build momentum so that they recover well. The ones that go dark and quiet, those are the ones that have a significantly tougher time recapturing the revenue. And so, yes, you got to be careful what you say, but that doesn't mean you don't say anything. Does that help?
Yep, 100%. And then Andrew, actually, this is a question that Mario asked, but I also kind of had a similar question, so I'll merge the two together. With this situation right now, you talked a lot about the uncertainty that entrepreneurs are going to be facing because they also don't know when this whole situation will end. So how do you go on a very tactical level of planning your long-term strategy around ad spend, product development, hiring? How do you go about setting those milestones if you don't know when this period will end?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I think there's maybe three parts to this, right? So one is high-level scenario planning, right? There's no way to forecast. Any investor or board or anybody that's asking for a forecast, they're asking for the moon. There's no way to forecast because there's so much uncertainty. So all you can do is say scenarios, right? Here's a good case, here's a bad case, here's the worst case, and here's our planned response. Here are the signals for worst case scenario, and here's what we'll do when we see those signals, and hopefully it'll never come to that. And here's the signals when we think that things are actually going well for us, and here's how we're going to invest into that. So at a high level, that's the way you've got to think about running your business, is in a series of scenarios and sort of triggers and executing against those. And those can change as you get more information. You can get sharper around that, but that's the framework. You're not going to be able to forecast your business with any level of detail or granularity. Specifically around marketing, if you think about on the macro side, and this is kind of this real interesting, interesting paradox, because there are more eyeballs looking at media than there ever have been, right? Or there have been in a very long time. But there are less people clicking on ads, and there are less people buying stuff, many things. And now certain categories, there's many more people. And so with more volume, and there's less people spending on ads. And so as you think about higher volume, lower competition, ad prices will drop. And so at least CPMs have dropped significantly when you're display advertising and things. And so then, from a macroeconomic standpoint, if you're in a position to start to spend on marketing, you can spend smartly, you can actually gain a lot of ground. Then I think it's important for you to understand your specific product, customer, and market, and how has it been affected, and what do you want to look like on the other side of this? Because if there's a way for you to take if your product is actually of use to people, then it's really important for you to get your marketing your marketing message sharp to identify people when they're thinking about that problem. If you help them gain more certainty, if you help them improve their revenue of their business during this time, if you help them reduce costs, or if you help them if you have a consumer product that is entertainment or a staple good or whatever, I think it's important for you to be able to frame that in a way that resonates with people in the headspace, meet them in the headspace that they're in. If your product may not, or you don't have a good way to pivot or reframe your product, I think there are still some opportunities, but you've got to think about it much longer term. Some of the examples that Ron brought up earlier is you can invest in brand. If you're in the position to be able to invest in brand, you invest in brand on the long term. And so that you are continuing to have the conversation, but again, meeting your customers where they are. You're like, look, I know you may not be in a position to buy my product. I know you may not be in a position to be a customer right now, but there will be another side of this. And I want you to know that I'm here alongside you, on the other side. And some companies don't have that luxury of being able to invest in brand to the other side, and they actually do have to cut back and they have to batten down the hatches. But if you're in a position to do that, then I think you sort of think through the time horizon that you want to invest in and go along the journey with your customers.
Cool.
Andrew's right. The deals to be had. There are billboards, pennies on the dollar. If you want out-of-home advertising is at a liquidation sale state right now.
Totally. Ron, another question for you. What have you noticed brands lack in their storytelling or marketing? And this actually ties into, I know you brought up Jeep and I know you brought up Dove as well as campaigns that you really loved. What was it specifically about those campaigns that resonated with you?
Well, I think what brands are lacking is they're lacking creativity. And the reason for that is because they feel that there's two reasons. One, the sandbox is really, really small. So like we can only talk about this one thing, therefore we can't be very creative. And of course, any creative person knows that's actually way better because you can be way more creative within a tighter confine of the thing you need to talk about. So that's one issue. The second issue is that people are afraid of being wrong. There is a fine line between brilliant and failure. And anybody who's watched stand-up comedy knows this. The closer you get to the line, the more brilliant it is until you step over the line. Then it's a gong show. And so because people are afraid of being wrong, what they're doing is they're not applying any creativity whatsoever. And they're just doing the scripted, the expected thing, which is why I just saw a piece from The Guardian of somebody who wrote a poem using the opening lines of all the emails that are coming from brands. In these unprecedented times, we know you're struggling. So it's if you think of it this way, what do we see when somebody has died? And I don't mean from that, but just when a friend has a parent pass away or something, what do? We say the scripted thing, right? We say, we're so sorry for your loss, our deepest condolences. There's no place to add creativity there, of course. And we don't want to step outside what is normally said. We say the script because we don't want to be wrong. Now, this is a time where there's obviously the sensitivity isn't comparable, but it's a similar place. We're afraid of saying the wrong thing. So we just go, what is the perfect thing to say? And we have no creativity whatsoever. That script gets really boring really fast.
Well said. Well said. And final question, Andrew, how do you inspire the team, your team that's working remotely right now, to leverage constraints for creativity, especially within pivoting? I know that Allen Gannett, who was our opening keynote, he brought up that one of the sources for creativity can be found with constraints. So how would you go about answering that?
No, it's a really good question. And I think it can be a bit of a gift, right? Being in this really strange environment, because it allows you to actually focus on what really matters. For us, we've accelerated our Q2 and Q3 product roadmap, and we got most of it out the door in a weekend, right? Literally, it was just like, hey, we were going to do this. These things seem like they would be valuable right now. Let's see if we can push them out faster, right? And let's see if we can shift around our priorities. I always look at it as I use the analogy of cooking for anybody who's ever cooked vegetarian food or cooked keto or whatever, or gluten-free. You only have a certain set of ingredients you can use, and you feel way more proud creating something that's delicious out of a constrained set of ingredients than having a fully stocked kitchen. If you you almost get paralyzed if you have a fully stocked kitchen and you're like, what could I do? Or could it have been better or whatever? If you can make something that tastes pretty good with only a subset of ingredients, you feel so proud of it, right? And I find that coming in and saying, hey, this is all we have to work with right now. We're remote. Here's where the capital markets are. Here's how we can find customers. We have to sell and coach and manage and all of this stuff. What can we do? Right? And what are the creative ways that you can still build team bonding? You can still onboard people. You can still, coach and rally people around initiatives and collaborate when you can't sit beside them and watch their computer or talk them through a sales call. And that, when you see those little wins, that's actually what people really love. and then I think, you know, what Ron was saying about creativity and saying the right thing, I think, you know, and being afraid to say the wrong thing. I feel that constantly. And look, I talk to our team every day, and we talk about what's on our mind, and that inherently means that I'm going to be wrong, and I'm wrong. Like, and like, you know, so when we first came into this, I was hopeful that we were going to bounce back very quickly. We'd be back in the office and we'd go full steam ahead. So I was like, look, we're going to do everything we can to not have to do any layoffs or restructuring, right? I was like, this is our goal. I thought my job was going to be to keep people kind of calm the anxiety and calm people down. Like yesterday, I had to eat my words, and I was like, look, the trade-off here is I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be a human being, and I'm going to tell you what you know, what I can see with the information that I have. The trade-off is I'm going to be wrong, and you're going to see when I'm wrong, and you're going to realize that I'm wrong quite often as a CEO. And you know, all I do is correct it as soon as I realize that. But I do think that and whether it's your customers or your teams, they are going to be much more forgiving when you're wrong if you're a human being about it, right? And even if you say the wrong thing, but you can be very explicit about your intentions, you actually have more leeway than you might think. I think when there's a sniff of insincerity, there's a sniff of profiteering or spin or narrative, that's when people pounce, right? When you know, so this is where, like, the virtue signal, this is where you can get yourself into trouble, is when it feels like you're leaving something unsaid, and there's a second story to be told, that's behind what you're actually telling people, and they feel like they're being led down a you know, insincere narrative. If you are just a human being in this environment and are just saying, you know, and you can be as explicit as saying, this is how I want you to feel when I make this, you know, when I deliver this message. And if you don't feel that way, then, like, I got it wrong, tell me. Like, you can actually be very explicit telling people how you want them to feel. And you actually have more leeway than you might think in delivering those messages.
Perfect. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Guys, that is really the end of this virtual event. Before we kind of sign off, I'd love for Mario from RDB or Hasib from the DMZ, which really helped a lot in putting this together. If you guys have any final words, you can go for it right now.
Thanks, Swish. I'm surprised. I think to the point of my predecessor who just talked, I think vulnerability, honesty, and is the key. We're all, again, in this together for better or worse. We'll all make mistakes. I think trying to spin it and reframe it positively and see this as the world's largest A/B test, or ABCDEFG test, helps look at it. Again, I would focus on communities like this to support each other. I really love how people come together and share, and it's about something bigger now. I also look forward to keep that going on after everything goes back to normal. Hopefully we can keep a bit of this. And Swish, thanks for organizing and jumping on it immediately. I think you were the best example of how you can react quickly and how you can turn it into a positive thing. So thanks for having us, and thanks to all the speakers and the guests. Toi, 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 as we say in Austin.
I love it. And Hasib, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys have said it all. Thank you to all the speakers. Swish, thank you so much for organizing this as well. And I think to say the world is going through a difficult time right now would just be a very, very big understatement. And it's affecting everybody in terms of our loved ones, our employees, and our businesses. So if there's anything we on the DMZ side can do to help out, please feel free to reach out. We're always here to offer a helping hand. So thank you everyone again for participating in this virtual webinar.
Amazing. Awesome. So thanks again, guys. You guys are going to get an email after with the recording of this event so you can watch it and have fun again. And then we'll be taking meeting notes as well. I've written up summaries for each talk, as well as some links and resources that Mario and Kieran really want to share with you guys as well. So have a wonderful day. Thanks again for joining us, and stay safe and healthy, guys.